So if I keep Kyle close and I do want him to come around in the future, now I have the ability to bring him back in from that net. That's a way that I think it's pretty crucial to support those candidates through the entire journey, even if they're not the ultimate sort of gold medalist, to make everyone feel like they're a silver medalist, they're still on the podium, and they're not, last place in the race. And I think that's pretty critical for organizations to do. It will build up so much future brand will and loyalty and connectivity.
This is the Rebel HR Podcast, the podcast where we talk to HR innovators about all things people leadership. If you're looking for places to find about new ways to think about the world of work, this is the podcast for you. Please subscribe from your favorite podcast listening platform today and leave us a review. Rebel on, HR Rebels. All right, Rebel HR listeners, extremely excited for today's guest. We were talking before I hit record that this podcast is all about HR innovation, and we have an innovator in our midst. So welcome to Yair Riemer. He is the CEO at Intoo, a leading career mobility solution provider for the HR, higher ed, and workforce sectors. 15 plus years experience as a founder and an operator in the PeopleTech and EdTech industries, building innovative career development solutions. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Kyle. Appreciate it.
Well, extremely excited for the conversation today. And, I have been passionate about innovation in the HR space for my entire career. And part of that motivation has been, I think there's an easier way to do this or a better way to do this. And I have a feeling that that's a little bit of your background. And so, before we get jumping into some of the questions here, I'd like to ask you, what prompted your interest into the people tech and ed tech industries?
Yeah. So, similar to you, Kyle, I know your background obviously in sales and marketing and ops. And I heard you say previously that sort of HR found you. You weren't necessarily looking for it, on a previous episode, but I think, I come from the same background. I was looking, early in my career to work with fast-paced, tech-focused startups. And I ended up, luckily being part of the founding team of a company called internships.com. And our goal, was really to change the way college students at the time could connect with job and career opportunities. So I just came across the HR space, of course, the intersection of HR and education and careers when you're sort of that 18 to 26-year-old college student, a recent graduate, was a pretty critical time for you to take your first job and take your first step. And since then, since the founding of internships.com and working to build up that business, I sort of stuck in the industry ever since. It's just an industry that provides, I think, so much reward every single day when you're coming into work every single day and you see someone email you that says, I got a job, or I got an interview, or I'm a finalist. And it's your technology or your career coaches that have sort of helped, be an advocate and make that process a little bit easier. Just kind of fell into it and sort of fell in love with it.
Yeah, I love that. And I don't know who got that domain name, but like internships.com, like, hey, winner.
Yeah, no, absolutely. SEO is a pretty critical part of our growth strategy. Back in 2009, 2010, we flew out to Richmond, Virginia and met a great entrepreneur who had owned the domain and acquired it from him and, taught us a couple of tricks about the site. And then we really rebuilt and launched the business, from scratch from there. So it helps to have something memorable, right? It certainly helps.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's for sure.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's so fascinating and, as I was researching and preparing for this, looking at your background, the fact that you've taken some solutions, with technology as the foundation, but still being focused on some of the best practices in people and education and really just digitizing that. So, as you look at a solution and as you think about, I think this might be something that could help somebody out. How do you identify the category that you're going to focus on?
Yeah, I think for us and for me, whether it's intentionally or not, most founders will say it was intentional, but authentic founders know that the journey is extremely circuitous and you kind of get from point A to point B to point C, not necessarily in a straight line. I think we started with the core concept in both of our HRtech or PeopleTech businesses, with democratization being a key component for solving problems. So if you go all the way back to internships.com, I was in school, believe it or not, in university almost 20 years ago now. When I was in college, only 20 years ago, there was no place online for students, undergraduates to search and apply for internships or jobs, right? LinkedIn didn't exist yet. Monster and Career Builder might have had a few dozen listings or postings. The only way to get a job was to walk in the freezing cold with your backpack to the career center where you didn't even know where it was on campus, open up this 3-ring binder and find the 5 alumni or 5 employees that might be hiring that graduated from the school 10 or 20 or 30 years before. It was a pretty broken process. And so we thought to ourselves, or of course, Kyle, if you happen to be lucky and you had an uncle or an aunt or a cousin who owned a business, or someone you knew that was, fancy or successful, you might be able to get your foot in the door and ask to get that summer internship or learning opportunity. And so we thought to ourselves, there's got to be a better way, right? And so really when it came to our first HRtech solution, which was building internships.com, this 2-sided marketplace with supply and demand, we thought, let's democratize this process, right? Internships shouldn't just be for those very few who can go in and find the 3-ring binder with the alum, or who can get an uncle or an aunt or a cousin or a friend. It should be for everybody. And so we set out to build that. When you have a clear purpose and you know that there's a need in the market, I think at the time there were 20 million undergraduate students in the United States across 2-year and 4-year universities. And by the time we built internships.com, we had over 2 million registered on our sites. Over 10% of the U.S. population was searching and applying for jobs on our website. I think that's kind of what drives you to solve the problem. It's got to be clear. It's got to be easy to understand. And then everything there is the hard part, the building part, right? But that's kind of where I would start. Clear need in the market is always something that you can rally a team around.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh man, you're telling that story is bringing me back to those days. Yeah. Slugging that backpack across campus with a suit that you never wore, but that one time, most uncomfortable thing ever. And yeah, it's like walking through the meat market and you're like, I don't know any of these companies, totally intimidating and completely, it's fascinating as I think about, the problem you're solving, as an intern, like you're just shooting from the hip, right? I mean, the opportunity to research the 100+ companies, it just doesn't exist. And so a lot of the companies you're talking to, you're learning as you go, and you're just kind of, you really can't be intentional about your internship, and talk about a pretty big impact on your future career, depending on the internship that you take. But, which is how I got into selling insurance, and then realized I don't want to sell insurance.
That's actually some of the greatest lessons that we had at building up that business, which is oftentimes it's not just what you can do that can turn into a full-time job, right? Imagine you're the AAA baseball player and you finally make it to the major leagues from internships to the full-time job. It's also what you decide you don't love and what isn't your passion. And what a better time to do that than while you're studying and not waiting until after the fact. And I think you mentioned, wearing that boxy suit, right? 20 years ago, things weren't as tailored as nicely as they are today. You're wearing this boxy suit.
No way, man.
It's a hand-me-down from your older brother or whatever it might be. But I think there was also a huge problem for the hiring employer. There was also a huge problem for the recruiting or talent acquisition professional, because they would send the entry-level recruiter, college recruiter onto campus. They'd fly there. They'd spend a couple $100 renting a car. They'd set up a little booth with a sign-in sheet, literally a piece of paper, and students would come and they'd write their name. If you lose that signing sheet on the way home, on that airplane, or in, there probably wasn't TSA pre-check at the time, but in the airport, you're in pretty big trouble. So that investment you've made as an HR organization to attract talent, it's a pretty tenuous investment for these little bite-sized interactions. So that's sort of what led us to solve that problem that existed with technology, right? So we built this community where hundreds of thousands of internships and jobs could be posted from tens of thousands of HR leaders and millions of students. They could come together. They created profiles. You could see what their GPA was, their interest, their major, their skills, and really, built almost a LinkedIn for the the higher education market. So yeah, I think it's, it's quite important from both sides to have that connectivity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, left internship.com and I know you had a successful acquisition by Chegg, which, obviously one of the massive education companies. And now currently the CEO at Intoo. So tell us a little bit about Intoo.
We'll be back after a quick break.
And so used to having everything in front of them right away that we forget that innovation just takes time. I myself, I get frustrated too. Why? And this as being one of my best friends is, hey, I talk to you all the time. Hey, man, I'm frustrated in the fact that I can't seem to just get there in the next day. But that's just not how these things work, right? Innovation needs to be planned out. It needs to be very methodical. And then when it finally hits, that's when it seems like to everyone else that it sort of just came out of nowhere. But to you, the amount of dedication that it took over that time.
Absolutely. So believe it or not, 10 to 15 years later after internships.com, we still set out with the concept of democratization. So our main core industry that we've serviced is the outplacement industry. So we basically help organizations across the entire employee life cycle in career development. Things are easier to remember in threes. So you're an applicant and you're applying for a job. You're applying to work at a company. So how can we improve that application or candidate experience for a company? Mm-hmm. You're an employee within a company. So how can we help you retain that employee and develop that employee? Or you're an employee transitioning out of the organization for whatever reason. How can we help you take care of that employee properly? So those are our three main solutions. We actually started with the latter. We started working in the outplacement or career transition sector. Similar to internships.com, we saw a market that was dramatically in need of technology. Outplacement is an industry that's been around for 50 or 60 years, was primarily focused on executive level only. So the example would be, I'm Yair, I'm the CEO of a company, my product didn't work out, or my company was acquired, I'm laid off, and I get my severance, and I get, my 2 or 4 weeks or whatever it might be, and my COBRA, and an organization would say, and Yair, we provided you this career transition as outplacement program. But what you had to do back then was get your boxy suit on again, drive in your car downtown, pay your $15 to park underground, and from 9 to 10, you learn, resume tips, and from 10 to 11, cover letter, and from 11 to 12, you take a Myers-Briggs assessment. Very structured, not that flexible, very in person, very executive focused. We said to ourselves, well, this is long before, Zoom and Teams and a COVID pandemic forced everyone to work virtually. But we said there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a less expensive way, a more affordable way. There's got to be a way where job seekers want to work at their own pace. They want to be flexible. They want to do things, frankly, in their sweatpants in their basement, right? And so we built a career development technology with on-demand career coaches that enables a candidate in transition to get that confidence, get that momentum, all from the comfort of their own home, their mobile phone, their tablet, their iPad, their computer, whatever it might be. And so we are career development technology combined with career coaching delivered 100% virtually. So it's really disruptive in the market because, one, we're able to provide access to many more people than we would if there was just a brick and mortar real estate location, and especially for people in rural areas, right? And two, we're able to significantly reduce the cost for HR leaders and employers who were paying for the pen in the office at ABC Career Transition Co., or they were paying for that long-term lease, right, when they were buying outplacement, instead of just paying for career coaching and technology in that way. So we set out to really drive that forward. A few years later now, we have over 600 enterprise customers, 600 HR leaders that we're working with across those three solutions, whether it's outplacement, career mobility and development, retaining employees, or candidate experience. But yeah, just to focus a small twist on technology in a sector that's great, many great players in the sector, traditional, historical, legacy players, a little bit of technology and ingenuity can really drive sort of a better way to solve a challenge.
Absolutely. And I think it's one of those areas that, I think it's really interesting to talk about outplacement, right? And if you talk to, HR professionals, what's the hardest thing that we do? Well, it's let people go, right? Especially if it's not their fault, right? When it's a layoff situation, maybe it's just a complete business restructure. Maybe your strategy's changed. Maybe there's somebody who's just not the right fit any longer, or, the job outgrew them. I mean, those things happen. We are in talk about a dynamic world over the last couple of years. It's not going to slow down. But, if you're going through that and you are struggling and you feel like you're not giving these employees every opportunity to be successful, I would encourage you to think about outplacement services, because if you go and you put yourself into somebody's shoes, probably one of the worst days of their life is the day that they lose their job. If you can give them somewhere to go, something that can help them, if you extend a hand, guess what? Those relationships that they still have at the organization still matter. And they will share how they were treated on the way out. And that can actually help build your culture in a positive way, even in a really, really challenging time. And so and there's some research on that, but I'd strongly encourage, if you haven't thought about that, and the website is intoo.com. Check it out. It's really interesting, and it's a topic that we don't talk about much as it relates to HR benefits programs.
When Molly, Patrick, and I tried to figure out how to start our own podcast, we didn't know where to start. Thankfully, we found Buzzsprout. Buzzsprout makes it super easy for us to upload our episodes, track our listeners, and get listed on all the major podcast networks. Today's a great day to start your own podcast. I know that you're one of our listeners, so you've definitely got something to say. Whether you're looking for a new marketing channel, have a message you want to share with the world, or just think it would be fun to have your own talk show, podcasting is an easy, inexpensive, and fun way to expand your reach online. Buzzsprout is hands down the easiest and best way to launch, promote, and track your podcast. Your show can be online and listed in all the major podcast directories within minutes of finishing your recording. Podcasting isn't that hard when you have the right partners. And the team at Buzzsprout is passionate about helping you succeed. Join over 100,000 podcasters already using Buzzsprout to get their message out to the world. And now, for listeners of Rebel HR, you can get a $20 Amazon gift card sent to you from Buzzsprout by clicking in the link in the show notes. Thanks for listening.
I'm curious to understand a little bit more about your approach to, kind of the onboarding, pre-boarding, career mobility too. How do those programs work?
Sure. Yeah. So we have a solution to help organizations around talent acquisition, which we basically call a candidate experience. And essentially, I'll sort of give you a story here, a true story from my past. Over 20 years ago, I was in university. I applied to work for the Boston Celtics in a summer internship. I'm a huge sports fan. Grew up in Boston and a number of places, New Jersey as well. And I thought, wow, this is going to be amazing. I'm studying marketing. I'm studying communications. I'm studying history. I'm such a great writer. I'm clearly going to get this job, right? And I'm still waiting to this day, 20 years later, for the response to my application. It went into some black hole somewhere.
It's probably in there right now, man.
In there right now. It's some old applicant tracking system. And I share that story because that is a common and typical candidate experience, even to this day, 20 years later. Companies have done a sensational job with applicant tracking systems and employer brand and showing you the culture and the photos and the videos of all the employees that work there. In fact, ATS systems are mobile optimized, so I can apply with the click of a button from my phone. And some of the basic blocking and tackling has just been missed or overlooked, right? And one of them is replying to those candidates and communicating with them authentically and openly about where they are in the process and keeping them part of that talent community. So the way we approach candidate experience is really with the lens of employer brand. We believe HR has an amazing responsibility as the steward of a company's brand, right? At the end of the day, you are the first point of contact for applicants, for employees. It's amazing, just as much, if not more than the marketing team, right? And so, everything that we do, everything that we build, all of our solutions are built around that brand perception and protecting that and enhancing that. And so from a candidate experience perspective, we actually have a solution, integrates with applicant tracking systems, and it enables companies to send an automated career development tool, a technology, basically, career development coaching, a site for all their declined applicants. So you're Kyle and you're applying to work with me, and I'm at XYZ Bank, and you're one of 100 applicants. And you're the second or third or fourth best applicant. But if I don't reply to you, you're going to go to say to your buddy, you're going to go say on Glassdoor, I worked 5 hours on my resume, on my LinkedIn, on my interview, and they never got back to me. But if I just send you a note that says, Kyle, you know what? You were a finalist for this position. There were so many great candidates. You didn't get it now, but we'd love to keep you part of our talent community. Here is our career development platform. XYZ Bank cares about you. Check it out. We've got assessments in there. We've got millions of job postings, resume builders, access to network and research information. Stay in touch with us. You're going to go from being sort of a brand detractor to at least a neutral, if not a positive advocate. And, you know, it's a candidate driven market right now. So if I keep Kyle close and I do want him to come around in the future, now I have the ability to bring him back in from that net. So that's a way that I think it's pretty crucial to support those candidates through the entire journey, even if they're not the ultimate sort of gold medalist, to make everyone feel like they're a silver medalist. They're still on the podium and they're not, you know, last place in the race. And I think that's pretty critical for organizations to do. It will build up so much future brand will and loyalty and connectivity.
Absolutely. You know, I agree 100%. And I think, you know, when you think about like employer brand, you know, in the quotations, what is an employer brand, right? It's, you know, I think about it like, you know, that's a rep, right? Like that's what people in the community see your organization as. And yeah, marketing has an important role to play, of course, you know, you see a TV advertisement but you know, my organization, we're business to business. Nobody knows what our brand is unless you specifically work in the industry that we are selling to. And so it doesn't fall on marketing to educate and communicate to a candidate. That's me, right? So I better get real good at helping to articulate what do we do, how do we do it, why do we do it? And you know, it's one of those things that it's so much of that falls back on that candidate experience. You know, you can say all the things and you can say, well, we make machinery that's recycling and it's biodiesel and it's CBD oil. It's all these really cool things that, you know, it's like, oh, that's a cool headline. But if you treat a candidate like crap,
yep,
and you don't hire them, they're never going to apply again. Yeah. I mean, it's pretty simple.
Exactly.
And I'll share a story of that. So, and I will not name names because we're in the midst of the process right now. But a few years ago, and I live in a pretty small community. I mean, it's not tiny, but it's definitely small enough that people know each other's names and definitely know the businesses around, right? So we don't have a whole lot of opportunity to draw from a huge pool of people, right? So a few years ago, I was working with an individual, and I left that organization, went to a new organization, and somebody applied for that job in the organization with the same last name. Well, guess what? It was her spouse. So ended up hiring this individual. He was absolutely awesome. Just knocked it out of the park. He was literally, we got a resume, and I called him that day that I got the resume. We had an offer to him within 3 days and didn't need any other candidates. It was literally the first resume that came in, right? It was like, oh, this is perfect. Well, he ended up finding a great opportunity, left that organization. I'm currently in a new organization. And guess what resume just came across my desk a few days ago? Well, guess what? Had that person, had a bad candidate experience or a bad employer experience and got my phone call and been like, I don't want to work with this jerk. Yep. Well, it probably wouldn't have gone well. Well, fortunately that wasn't the case, but it's just funny. Like these paths cross, right? And this reputation, it will follow you well beyond whatever, pamphlet marketing put together.
It's exactly correct. I think it's a great story, and I'm sure every HR practitioner listening is nodding their head in agreement, because that is the power of authenticity. We're in HR technology, or we're in HR, and it's a people business, right? People work for companies and for people. They don't work for job descriptions. And so if you show who you are and if you show, what your belief system is, and that resonates with someone, they're going to follow you if that experience was good. And the data backs this up as well, right? I think there's a study from the Harvard Business Review. It's focused more on the consumer side, but it's something like if you're an organization, a restaurant or a mechanic or any business on Yelp, the difference between a 3-star review and a 4-star review is a 10% increase in your revenue. And the difference between a 4 and a 5%, another 10%. So every single star rating or user review is 10% bump in revenue, right? The higher your rating, the better review. And that's the world we live in. And Glassdoor is there for us, as well as a number of other companies, Comparably and others, Indeed. And so I think great HR leaders value that reputational aspect because it's not 20 years ago where I remember sitting in the classified section and opening up newspapers in high school, right, and looking for jobs in a newspaper. And now everything is connected and word of mouth plays the biggest role.
Absolutely. It's funny. You mentioned that. I mean, I think there's so many statistics out there that show, hey, better whatever employee, opinion survey scores, better candidate experience, happier employees, better morale, and there's all those dollar signs. But what's so cool about the work that we do is the fact that it's also just the right thing to do. Right? Like
exactly right.
Like, I'm not the preeminent thinker on psychology, but I know if I do something that is, not the right thing to do, it's not going to end well for me. Right? Yep. So sometimes it's just boiling it down to just that simple, right? Just doing the right thing. So I want to talk, you alluded to this a little bit, and I want to deep dive this just a little bit because I have a feeling you have maybe a different perspective. So we hear a lot about the Great Resignation, and the new world of work and the new normal and all, there's all these buzzwords out there. And sure. So that has sent HR, CEOs, boards scrambling to say, okay, how are we addressing the Great Resignation? And so obviously I know that's your business. So as you look at how you support businesses and what businesses can do to be proactive and thoughtful and continue to retain some of these top players, what advice or thoughts do you have on how we can approach this?
Yeah. Wow, that's a difficult one and an important question. I think the short answer is it goes back to exactly what you just said. Honesty, authenticity, listening, and doing the right thing. I'll give a longer answer as well as probably I'm wont to do, but I think that's the short answer. At the end of the day, the cost of replacing employees is so high. I think something like 4.3 million Americans quit their job in August, 3% of the workforce. Something like 1 in 4 workers quit their job in 2021. So this is the number one topic on the minds of HR leaders. I think at the end of the day, there are some really sort of easy, no cost or low cost ways to, rebel, if I may say, against the resignation. And I think the first one, honestly, is listening to your people, right? So there are easy ways to do that. I think there's a famous Mark Twain quote, right? If you tell the truth, you don't have to remember anything. And so really it's telling the truth amongst your executive and leadership team is what I mean by that. What are we good at? What are we not good at? Being honest. Let's not hide our weaknesses. Let's look at that. So let's be honest with them. Let's survey our team, survey our leadership team, continuous feedback and communication. I think one thing that's really cool that we've done at our organization is a hyper focus in the last few years, totally proactively, not in response to the Great Resignation, just to your point, Kyle, as the right thing to do, a really big focus on recognition. I think employees love to be recognized, some in private, some in public. It's not a one size fits all. So you really have to understand sort of department by department and leader by leader how it works. So we started a practice a year or two ago, which we call the chain of recognition. And every single Friday, without fail, we nominate one person. One person keeps the chain going. So if it's Kyle this Friday, and you write about one other person in the organization who meets the values at Intoo. So we've got 4 core values which we live by internally: speed, innovation, collaboration, and caring. And every Friday, someone in the company, one person in the company, the previous winner from the previous Friday, writes an email, staff all email, that says, I'm nominating Kyle this week because of A, B, and C, or X, Y, and Z. And the next week, it's your turn, Kyle. And so you keep that chain moving. And then it's your turn on Friday, and you can say, this person helped me with A, B, or C, or this person helped me with X, Y, Z. And it's a human element at the end of the week to take a deep breath, to realize we're collaborators, we're a team, we respect each other. We're recognizing success, we're recognizing and promoting that positive behavior. And I think it really goes a long way. It's a free thing to do. I think organizations that have struggled have focused on quick fixes and transactional fixes to retention and the resignation. Things like a ping pong table back when we were working in the office, or a $50 monthly stipend to go to the gym, right? And those are fine benefits, and those are great benefits if you're looking at benefits as a silo. But if you're looking at retention generally, I think something that's a bit more meaningful goes along a much longer way. So think about recurring retention benefits: training, development, teamwork, recognition, L&D, right? So there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach, but I really think that, retention is something that if you want to do it, you can do it. The worst thing in the world to hear from an HR executive or a CEO, and if you're one of the people listening to this and this is what you're thinking, then you got to do better. You got to do much better. And the worst thing to hear is there's nothing we can do. It's the market, man. It's the market. Work from home, in-demand skills. It's the market. It's the market. Bro, they pay so much more than me. That's the worst thing you could do. That is such a defeatist thing to do, right? The optimist in me says, if you want to prioritize this, if this is important to you to retain those people, you can do things. You can learn, you can listen, you can take that feedback in from your people, and then turnover will be reduced significantly. So it's absolutely one of the top, if not the top, concept or topic amongst HR leaders right now. And you don't have to have a big brand. You can have a small brand, but you can do a great job with this, and you can really work on retaining your employees. And it takes effort, and it doesn't happen on its own.
Yeah, I'm laughing here because I do have a ping pong table at one of my offices. It has not correlated to an extremely low turnover rate. So, I think there's probably something to that.
We had a ping pong table at our office as well before we went all virtual in the pandemic. So it takes one to know one. And I challenge any listener, if you're in the greater Los Angeles area, challenge you to a match. But that's not the reason you stay at a company. You definitely enjoy it with your colleague, but it's certainly not the reason you stay.
Yeah, no, my problem is, I get a ping pong table or something like that, and I'm so hyper competitive that then it becomes like a morale bust, right? Because it's like, man, now I'm mad at this guy.
Coming here and losing every day. Exactly. I got to change. I'm sweating through my shirt. I have to have an extra dry cleaning bill to work at this company. It's doubly expensive. Yeah.
Just threw out my shoulder trying to blow, and I didn't even hit it on the table, whatever. Right?
Exactly. Hopefully you have the good health plan though.
Hey, yeah. Well, there you go. No, but that's, what I love about that is it's not expensive. It's not some like world-breaking, world-shattering technology that nobody's ever thought about. It's the human element. Again, there's a common theme here, right? It's going back to recognize somebody for doing something that it was good. Make it authentic and make it a system. Make it repeatable, right? So that it doesn't get lost in the flavor of the month. Right.
Exactly.
So as the CEO, I'm assuming that you were the first one, or you were the one that set that expectation for your team?
I sent the first email out, and I know exactly who won that first email. It was our VP of legal, our legal counsel. She had worked on building a ton of amazing infrastructure for us and all of these great sort of contracts that we had done at the end of that year, and we started. And I sent a long email, sort of recognizing her for her accomplishments. And she was the one who then the next Friday sent the second one. And ever since then, the greatest part about it for me is when we hire someone new to explain that you're joining a company where this is happening. So this coming Friday, you're going to get this weird email. And this is why we do this weird email, because we're a team here and we recognize each other. And it's a really great feeling. And like you said, it's free. There are so many free tasks, right? At a previous organization, we did one where we BCC'd everyone. We sent them just 2 questions in their email. I wrote 1, what do you love about your job? And 2, what do you love about our company? We got, 100 responses, and we picked a few of the best, and we asked them for permission to put them on our website. And it's still on the website to this day. Why do you love working here? Right? And so we used it for the external employer brand. You mentioned it. The community now can see, why do you love working there? And we used it sort of internally for these employees to sort of, hey, remind themselves and think about it. What are the reasons why I love it? So there's so many things that you can do that don't require a 6-figure enterprise implementation, right? In a 6-month technology process.
Absolutely. And that's coming from a guy in the tech space, so I mean, I'm sure you would have a solution if somebody wanted to do that. But, I think great advice for our listeners if they don't have a 6-figure budget for recognition.
That's exactly correct.
Well, this has been an absolutely wonderful conversation. Just thoroughly enjoyed learning about your story and your organization and kind of your journey here. But I want to shift gears, and we're going to go into the Rebel HR Flash round. So,
okay. All
right, here we go. Question number 1. What is your favorite people book?
My favorite people book is probably Grit from Annie Duckworth, I think is the author. And it's really about a focus on initiative, a focus on managing yourself as well as other people to bring the best out of your work ethic and your focus. I just finished one called Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke, which is really about the discipline to make proper decisions, and the discipline to not look at outcomes, with a bias after the fact. So, wow, I did this layoff. Should I have done it after the fact? And then actually to look at the decision and the reasons for making it in real time, sort of a behavioral science, component. So yeah, I would say Grit is probably number 1 all time, but Thinking in Bets, which I just finished, was a great one as well.
I love that. Thinking in Bets. Yeah. It's like, like probability of decision making and thinking, more strategically as opposed to emotionally. Is that kind of the
exactly
gist?
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly right. With practical examples. And then also, we use this in technology a lot in product development, a retrospective, right? Let's look back and let's look back at how we accomplished it. And I think that's important for all leaders, especially HR leaders who are more and more, responsible for the culture and the feeling and executive, impact in an organization as well.
That's one of the, that's really interesting. And, especially as my career has progressed, it gets harder and harder to think in those terms. And it gets harder and harder to separate some of the emotion and the strategy and truly make good decisions. And it gets harder. So that's interesting. I'm gonna check that out. And then Grit's just a great book. And well worth the read. It's a good read. It's a timely read for the last few years that HR's been going through. So if you're getting ready for, vaccine mandates, you might want to pick that one up. All right. Question number 2. Who should we be listening to?
So I think there is, his name is Byron Augusta. He is a great, Opportunity at Work is his newsletter. And he is really a great economist who looks at where the future of work is going, what the impact is, of both macroeconomic components. You mentioned the vaccine mandate, as well as upskilling and reskilling in various aspects of labor. So sometimes we can get so into our company or our job or our task list, the micro level, and that's great. But I think having a bit of that curiosity and looking sort of high level, he is sort of one of these voices that puts it all together for me. So his name is Byron Augusta. It's Opportunity at Work newsletter. He's all over LinkedIn. And he's a really interesting economist who's looking sort of at macro labor trends.
Cool. Sounds like the kind of thing I could nerd out on. So
Yeah, you definitely could. You absolutely could.
All right. Last question. How can our listeners connect with you?
Yeah. So, it's my first name, Yair, and dot, and then my last name, Riemer at Intoo.com. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn as well. Our website is Intoo.com, Intoo.com. Please feel free to follow us on LinkedIn. We're always putting out there reports, data around retention, great resignation, webinars, candidate experience, and of course our core career transition and career development. So if you're looking for data, studies, facts, let me know, shoot me an email, find us on LinkedIn. Happy to connect both personally and from the company social media outlets as well.
Sounds good. We will have all that information in the show notes. So if anybody wants to get connected, learn more, strongly encourage it. Really great conversation today. Appreciate the time and look forward to seeing what you come up with next.
Thank you so much, Cal, for having me. Have a great day.
Thank you, Yair. Have a good one.
Thanks. You too.
All right. That does it for the Rebel HR podcast. Big thank you to our guests. Follow us on Facebook at Rebel HR Podcast, Twitter at Rebel HR Guy, or see our website at rebelhumanresources.com. The views and opinions expressed by Rebel HR Podcast are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any of the organizations that we represent. No animals were harmed during the filming of this podcast.
Baby.